Hello and welcome to another episode of Political Party. I'm Hamish.
And I'm Tim. With us today is our friend Chloe and Avanti. Oh wait, Avanti didn't come this week because she slept
sorry.
in. Chloe, introduce yourself.
Typical. Hey guys, how you going? I'm Chloe, one of Tim's friends. Got roped into this, so let's see how it goes.
Roped in or totally voluntarily appeared on the show of your own free will,
Oh, of
North
course.
Korea style. So, coming up on the show this week, Game of Drones, where we ask the real questions about drones and their implications for our future. Then, Blundergate, the segment where we examine the sometimes humorous mistakes of our politicians. Then, Less Sexy Than ISIS, where we discuss the real issues in the Middle East. And finally, our parody news section. All that and more coming up.
Cool. So let's talk about drones. Just quickly before we go into it, drones are at UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and what they do is they're used for like multiple purposes. They do recon and intelligence. They also direct airstrikes. So these drones are purported to be, fighting terrorism, and it saves American personnel and stuff. We can go into that. The problem with them is that people say they're indiscriminate and that the technology is currently lagging behind where...
One point. Drones also have many civilian uses, but you'll hear more about that later.
Yeah, and then in the second block of this debate, we'll talk about the domestic use of drones and what that holds.
Yeah, so we're talking about combat drones.
Yeah.
So basically the deal with combat drones is they have a bunch of sensors and stuff on them, and people can fly around, launch missiles from the drones at targets. The drones are very accurate with what they target, but they're dependent heavily on intelligence reports from the ground. Apparently, Edward Snowden revealed that it is actually possible for any CIA contractor to watch what the drones are doing in real time on a screen, which is pretty crazy. So these drones are used for a variety of purposes. Typically, the main drone we use is the Predator drone, which was originally designed for reconnaissance, but was then fitted out with missiles because why not? It's since proven extremely effective in this role. It's much cheaper than a regular airplane to fly around. Drones are also used for a number of other purposes, mostly recon. There was actually an incident a few years back where a sensitive US stealth drone flying over Iran got brought down intact by the Iranians. They must have figured out how to hack it and take control of it. So that's one of the limitations of drones, is that if the enemy has even basic electronic warfare capabilities, then control of them is not guaranteed. There are a number of new combat drones being developed on the horizon that combine such features as stealth, autonomous flight, autonomous selection of targets. So we really have to see just how far these drones can go with picking their own enemies. Flight control systems of the drones are so advanced that they can actually take off and fly around by themselves. The person only needs to order them where to go, what altitude to fly at. So they've come a long, long way since the first few days. Examples of these drones are the X-47 and the BAE Tyrannus, but that's not so interesting. Anyway, let's talk about ethics, shall we?
What do you think, Chloe, about drones?
Look, I think everyone can agree that drones do have their benefits and, negative purposes as well. The interesting thing with drones is that they were actually first built to target Osama bin Laden. Eventually, the US only used them to target some top Afghani military person involved in Al-Qaeda. But, so in terms of ethics, I think drones are so multifaceted that you really have to break it down into combat drones and non-combat drones.
Absolutely.
So non-combat drones, you're looking at, I suppose almost like artificial intelligence. So you've got robots performing all these daily duties like, house cleaning or, delivering pizza, as I saw on the internet. Apparently Domino's decided to try all that.
Genius.
Yeah.
Although, more about the civilian drones after the break. Like, we're going to have a break and then talk about civilian drone use. So.
Yeah. Well, looking at combat drones then, you've got Israel as the biggest exporter of drones, but I suppose the only visible source you see in the media is the US using them. So they've started bringing them into Darwin, I believe, and then I think the biggest debate on combat drones is actually the size of them. So even though at the moment there are all these big drones with missiles attached to them, I think the ones that you've most got to be worried about are the little ones. So, rigging them as almost like, self-destructive drones. So all you have to do is send them to a certain coordinate and let it explode. And if a country can't hack into it, then I think that can cause a lot of destruction. I suppose that's something to be wary of.
That is something to be wary of. I mean, it's not like a little drone surely couldn't carry that much of a warhead, but if it was a small nuclear warhead, then
Exactly.
that would. Here's an interesting fact, though. Apparently, Russia was supplying arms to some Middle Eastern state or other, and Israel warned that if Russia keeps doing it, they'll be forced to supply Ukraine with things like drones as a response. So that's interesting. A lot of these small Israeli drones are, I believe, they're man-portable, and they're launched and used primarily for battlefield reconnaissance at this stage, although the idea of self-destructing drones probably definitely holds some sort of appeal. It's mostly the US ones that have gotten publicity. They're just so much bigger and more interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, like the thing about drones is they can be like 42 feet wide, so they're quite big. But
The size of a regular combat jet.
They fly at about 50,000 feet, which is, high enough that they don't get noticed by the enemy. So they're able to create like 3D images of the ground below. So they are quite selective. They are very able to be a discriminant device, and like in particular, like drones kill fewer civilians, like as a percentage of total fatalities than any other like military weapons. So
But why is that? Is it because the operator's in a safe environment and has access to a better view of the battlefield than a jet fighter pilot?
Sure, well, there's a number of factors that come into that. Firstly, drones don't have to worry about being caught by someone, right? Like they don't have to be swift and quick, like a Harrier airstrike, for example. But
Although a Raptor airstrike is capable of evading radar. And
sure. Anyway, like drones, like the pilot is in less of like an adrenaline-filled kind of environment. They're able to make more rational decisions. They're safer, and their physical integrity isn't threatened. But also, drones are able to be quite more they're able to be more accurate because there's like the technology allows for like multiple drones to be flying around an area at any one time. And they're able to use like heat cameras and stuff to pick off targets, and they're able to, as you said, some of them are able to like create their own like targets and wait for approval and stuff. So,
although here's the thing, the B-1 bomber can do a lot of that stuff that you just suggested. It can detect its own targets on the ground. It's a bombardier's job, and then it can drop all like 50 odd of its guided bombs on different targets, and they'll all land exactly where the computer wants them to. So that's a capability that we already have that isn't necessarily specific to drones. What I reckon the big advantages of drones are is that they're very cost efficient. They're much lighter than a regular aircraft for the mass. It's like the amount of payload you can loft up on a drone is always going to be greater for the cost than an airplane because you don't have to worry about flying a heavy human around and all their associated life support. That's probably the main advantage for drones at the moment. I'd say right now.
Well, they make people safer. Like that's one of the. That's another like huge point about drones is that you're not putting a military target in an area, and it's like it's part of this growing sort of like technological movement to, remove humans from the actual battlefront.
Because training pilots is expensive.
But also, you've also got to train pilots to use drones.
You do, but you've got no risk of losing that investment.
That's true, but then I guess the other thing you've got to consider is that I suppose it's safe to assume that as nation states build up their capacity for drones, then it's going to be a drone-on-drone warfare rather than a drone on humans, which is good. But I guess the other thing you've got to consider then is, will there be more casualties?
Because of where the conflict is actually happening. Like, sure, it'll be drone versus drone, but it'll be drone versus drone over the skies of Pakistan, not
exactly
in the
right.
USA.
Yeah, exactly. Actually,
so that means that the outcome of that conflict is going to be, asymmetrical and disproportionate.
Here's something interesting about drone warfare. The Russians have just released their new tank design recently, which I talked about on a previous episode. But an interesting thing about this tank is that it's been designed to be a fully robotic tank in the future. It's been designed with some of those systems already in place. So we are definitely seeing an increasing move toward drones on the battlefield. But what I reckon about the current generation of Predator drones is that they were created to fight third world countries. Like 50,000 feet will keep you safe from any weapon that any third world army would have access to, but it won't keep you safe from modern Russian or Chinese weapons. Additionally, as we've seen, their communications at the base are susceptible to getting hacked by any country that has the resources to do it. And likely Russia and China would be among these countries. We've even seen Iran is among these countries. So they do have their limitations, but still a very effective means of fighting third world countries.
Yeah, but like the thing is, drones are so effective, so useful, so cost efficient, and so like good for technological kind of innovation that they are like their technological capabilities are being increased by the day. They're becoming more cost effective, more fuel efficient, so they can fly longer. Like at the moment, the primary like the most used drone for assault purposes is the MQ-9 Reaper, and that can fly for 27 hours at a time.
Yeah.
It can fly, like close to 4,000 miles.
There was actually a contract for a drone that was part balloon, so it could linger over the battlefield for days.
Yeah, well, the original drones were balloons used in the First and Second World Wars. Those still counted as drones.
Were they remote controlled?
They were able to be controlled from the ground, I'm pretty loose on my knowledge of this, but I know that they were used to like take photographs and stuff.
I know there were people in reconnaissance balloons and
Yeah.
reconnaissance zeppelins, but
Yeah, right, and that's still a drone. you know?
actually, there are people. But as far as I'm aware, this is interesting. It's differing definitions of drone, but as far as I'm aware, some of the first drones used were actually for target practice. They were remote-controlled aircraft. And here's an interesting fact: next time you see someone flying a little remote-controlled plane around, that's a drone.
Yeah. Another sort of benefit of having drones is that the pilots have a longer career span because they no longer they are extremely less susceptible to post-traumatic stress disorder and other conflict-induced
Not sure, are they? I've heard that drone pilots, they're like always in tune with communications on the battlefield. They feel like they're there. They do feel a lot more like on the field than we would expect them to, despite them being miles away from it. Because they're still in contact with the soldiers. They hear everything that's going on. So...
Well, yeah, of course, but I think there's still a big difference between actually being there and seeing it on a screen.
You're probably right, but these are screens with very high graphical fidelities, and furthermore, they're actually listening to all the soldiers conversing on the battlefield. I mean, it's not that different from being... The only real difference, in my opinion, between a drone pilot and an airplane pilot is that a drone pilot isn't being crushed around in his seat by G-force. But apart from that, very similar. I mean, normally an airplane pilot would just look out the window and see the soldiers and not actually be there. And, like, they don't often get hit either when they're in aircraft. So if you're not hit, why would you... You'd have about the same risk of getting PTSD as a drone pilot.
Well, I'm reading a study here conducted by Chappelle and McDonald from 2 years ago. It's like an occupational health and safety report into drones and drone pilots. Only 4% of active duty drone pilots have ever been like clinically diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is in contrast to like 20%, which is like soldiers returning from active battlefronts.
What about pilots? Do you have statistics for pilots?
No, it's a big report. I'm not going to read all the way through.
No, that's fair enough.
Like nonetheless, I think that that's just like a good point to consider as well.
Yeah.
We're going to go to a song and we'll come back and talk about the domestic use of drones. This next song is called Mercy by Muse. It is from their new album, aptly titled Drones. And the song is a human metaphor. The human in the song is a drone. Is a metaphor for
a corporate drone? Welcome back to Political Party.
We're talking about drones at the moment, and after a sort of reasonable discussion about the military use of drones, we're now going to shift our focus to the home front. Yes. I know Chloe's got a couple of case studies about like weird ways that drones have been used in the domestic.
If by weird you mean awesome.
What do you got?
Yeah, cool. So, looking at the domestic use of drones, there's so many different uses for them. So, I was reading online yesterday how probably the most renowned example of, I suppose, gentle uses of drones was actually Domino's Domino's Pizza looking into using drones to make their deliveries. So they'd have almost like a little basket type thing hanging off the drone with the pizzas in it, and then they'd pilot the drone from their shop to deliver them to people.
That'd be great.
Oh, I swear it'd make it a lot more quicker.
Amazon already do that.
Yeah.
Not in Australia, unfortunately.
Oh, of course
Australia
not.
Post is going to have to keep up. I reckon if they buy drones, they'll save their asses because like
Probably.
if you can deliver something from New South Wales to Victoria in like 12 hours and you don't have to go to an actual post office,
Oh,
that
but
postal
Save heaps
service,
of
once you
time.
privatise that, it'll become a very effective.
it'd be reasonably expensive to do that, though. Like 12 hours.
No, it's,
Oh, well, such is
it
life.
won't be
Oh.
eventually. You know, everything gets cheaper because we're going to keep, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here are
that's
some of
it.
the
digging all of our resources out of the ground.
Some of the other use of drones I've heard is that during the California wildfires a few years back, drones were actually used to monitor the fire's spread,
Yep.
see where it was, guide the firefighting aircraft. Maybe in time we'll have drones used as firefighting aircraft as well. Drones could also have applications in such areas as spreading fertilizer on fields. Right now that's done by manned aircraft, but drones could represent a significant saving. What else could drones be used
Well,
for?
drones are being like the big debate about drones used domestically is like
It's quadcopters.
mainly related to police. Like
Really?
yeah, well
Yeah.
the police have been you know pushing to use drones, particularly in the States for like anything small from like how would you call it, like speeding tickets and stuff. Like you can use drones to like at the moment in the US, and they trialed this, the New South Wales government trialed this on the Hume Freeway, using like aircraft to monitor speed of vehicles on the ground.
I've seen so many funny pictures. This zone speed limit enforced by aircraft, and there's like a picture of a helicopter hiding in some bushes.
And yeah, and like also drones, like police being able to use drones to like survey an area, like particularly if there's like some sort of like assault happening in a backyard, they can use that drone to gather intel about the situation before they move in, so they can get a more three-dimensional picture of what's happening. And yeah, it's sort of it has a lot of, you know, really positive uses, but when you like police obviously have a mandate to act in like in criminal like law enforcement and stuff, but the problem with that is that when the police start flying drones around monitoring everyone's behavior, people no longer are able to have secrets because the police will catch you doing literally everything, and then you'll have like a Big Brother 1984-esque society where drones are being used to
Not like-
survey the population.
Not like we aren't in society already. We literally carry the instruments of surveillance around with us in our pockets. But to me, it's interesting you bring up police as the main ethical conflict, because although that's a big one, I thought, to me, it was always private drones fitted with cameras being able to just fly around onto anyone's property and do what they like. There is nothing to stop someone flying a drone to look into people's windows or whatnot. So that's...
People have been arrested for using drones, particularly near the airport, to shoot amateur films and stuff.
Fair enough.
Like also the use of drones for homegrown terrorism is a threat that's been raised, which, you know, has very dangerous capabilities, but no more dangerous than what any other like civilian can possibly do with it.
I suppose if that was going to be an issue, we would have already seen it with remote-controlled aircraft.
Well, remote
Yeah,
control
exactly right.
aircraft are like incredibly like expensive, and they're not as proliferated
They're not-
as they could be in the future.
They're not that expensive. It's like $400 or $500 for one, as far as I'm aware. Which is, it's not cheap, but it's definitely within the terrorist's price range.
Yeah. Well, like an important sort of use for drones as well is that like Google wants to use them to like
Internet?
monitor traffic and to spread internet, and you know they like this problem of richer companies get to put more drones out there, and soon our skies will be full of these aircraft that are gonna like, you know, create Google Maps and stuff, or like autonomously, which is like fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But when you've got corporations flying around these aircraft, you know, the potential dangers of that are frightening.
They can monitor where you go and then target
Well,
advertisements.
they
at
do
you.
that to you with credit cards.
Yeah, but they can extra monitor where you go.
Yeah.
Like literally any corporation will be able to stick drones in the air, follow your car, and be like, "Oh, he's going to this shop. He must be interested in this. Let's target ads."
Yeah, well, I guess that's where you've got to be careful, and I suppose when drones do become popular, because I guess I think it's safe to assume that it is going to be inevitable.
Absolutely.
Then I suppose you have to think about, well, what sort of legislation is going to be created to ensure that, I don't know, your privacy is sort of, at least, there is an attempt to protect your privacy.
Yeah. It should be the job of legislators to do that.
Oh, it should be.
But can you legislate this stuff? Like, is legislating on, like, technology like this sort of like a last grasp at the state trying to intervene in something that's way too difficult to police?
I don't...
Like, the state trying to intervene with, like, internet use, for example. Like, has that transcended the ability for legislators to act? Like, how do you police the use of drones? Are they going to have something that shoots them down, something that monitors the skies? Where do they get the resources
I
to do
reckon,
that?
since drones have to operate on different wavelengths, it'd be relatively easy to set up radio stations that can detect the radio signals released by drone controllers and detect where they end up. I reckon that it wouldn't actually be that difficult to do, and we have seen areas in which the state necessarily intervened to regulate an area but had many potential dangers, that being guns in Australia. The state did introduce gun control legislation. It was a huge success. So I believe if the state could do something like that with guns, which were extremely ubiquitous previously, then surely it's possible to do it with drones. If we can regulate the internet, which we can do it to an extent. I mean, you will not stop an extremely determined person from doing what they want, no matter how hard anyone tries. But you can stop most people, which is enough. And you can attempt to go after those few who don't follow the regulations.
Yeah, I'm reading here that the US Justice Department has attempted to provide policy guidelines around UAVs. This story came out yesterday.
Actually, drones in a way may regulate themselves because of the fact that each drone needs to operate on its own specific wavelength. If someone gets too close to another drone controller who's also operating on the same wavelength, then they're going to lose control of the drone.
Yeah, I doubt that drones are going to be like using analog like technology for long. Like, I'm sure soon that they'll have like independent, like you can operate drones from your mobile. Like at festivals in the United States, like Coachella, for example, officials fly around quadcopters with cameras and stuff, and like people are allowed to watch that feed from their phones and take photos and stuff.
They still communicate through radio waves, though.
Yeah, right, and that's a really outdated technology that's not going to last long.
No, I don't think so.
drones.
What else would you use to communicate if not radio waves?
Yeah, like internet or something. Right?
But internet is waves.
Yeah, sure, but it's not going to be something that's so easily like transferred through like easily confused like remote controls. I don't think that's going to be an issue with technology.
What's going to happen is they're going to start like encrypting the connections or something so that they only receive specific signals. Of course, it'd still be possible for a determined person to brute force a drone, but
well, there's some really cool uses of drones out there as well. Like they use it at the cricket to like follow people around, because like at the MCG has this like wire mounted camera that moves around, but like you can fly like these little cameras around at sports grounds and stuff. And
yeah, and it's much better than a wire mounted camera because obviously you can just fly around the whole field, record everything, record all the game.
Cool.
It'd be kind of unfortunate if one of those got hit by a cricket ball or something, though.
Oh, well, that's the risk you put it in when you're flying a little fucking aircraft around a sport ground.
There we go.
Concluding thoughts on drones, what do you think, Hamish?
Well, I mean, look, the future's been disappointing in many ways, but one way it hasn't been disappointing is the development of drones, and I think drones are inevitably going to see more uses in the civilian sphere, and I think that is mostly going to lead to benefits. And unless you really care about your privacy and leave all your windows open, it shouldn't be too much of a problem for us. But again, the potential benefits from drones are really quite extreme. There'll be cost savings to be found across pretty much all fields. So, yeah.
Chloe?
Yeah, no, like, I definitely echo most of what Hamish said. So, like you said, there's going to be a lot of benefits to drones as they do continue to develop going into the future. They're going to be very cost and time efficient. So with simple things like postage, if you're thinking of civilian drones, and then looking at combat drones, they're also going to be very beneficial in terms of turning into human-based warfare to drone-based warfare. But the only thing you have to consider about that is, the potential of misfires when that does happen and debris falling out of the air, etc., etc.
The real question is whether or not one day we'll just decide to have the drones able to call the shots themselves and launch the shots themselves. I have a feeling that is going to be considered at some point, if it's not been considered already.
Well, look, I'm sure it's being considered already, to be honest, but I think that's where you've got to... that's just such a hard line to toe along.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah, so I'm not too sure about that one. I'm sure, they're looking into developing the technology for that, but I think we've got a long way before that does come into play.
Another interesting thing, briefly, is that drones fit in very well with other emerging technologies. I mean, most civilian drones are electric-powered, and we're starting to see things like cheaper solar panels, the Tesla Powerwall. These are all technologies that will...
Does the Powerwall have anything to do with drones?
The Powerwall stores energy from solar panels, and that energy can be used to charge drones. So, we could be seeing a completely green age of electric-powered drones, is what I'm saying. This is encouraging stuff in a world of disappointments and despair. So, what do you think, Tim?
I think that drones are going to be proliferated, whether we like it or not. I think it's really good for amateur filmmakers and stuff. Drones have been used by, they've been used in music videos to take some quite amazing shots, particularly In Heart's Wake. You might want to check that out. I don't think that, I think that the military and the police are going to end up using them. I don't particularly like the use of police using them domestically because I don't think that the citizenry should be constantly held to account by the state. I think it should be the other way around.
You're right.
But, I think that drones are, while I don't really want them flying around above, our society monitoring us at all times, I think it's going to happen anyway, so we've just got to prepare for it.
Yeah, people will, of course, find ways around it, though, but carrying umbrellas everywhere.
Alright, we're gonna move to our next song. This is a song about the abuse of leadership. This is called Superhero, Faith No More.
And we are back. This week, instead of Blundergate, we're going to talk to you about gay marriage in Ireland.
Yeah, so in Ireland, the refusal of gay marriage was part of their constitution, and so they had a referendum with the people, and a lot of people flew in from overseas and stuff to have a vote. As part of that referendum, which pulled a 1.9 million turnout. I'm not sure how big Ireland is in terms of population, but it sounds like a lot.
Yeah, surely not that big. Scotland's only got 5 million.
And so they voted yes on the referendum to include to remove gender discrimination from marriage from their marriage clause altogether, and they won in an absolute landslide. So that's a great victory for the world.
Tell you what, though, previously this issue really earned the ire of the land.
Oh, Hamish, the struggles. But yeah, no, I think it's absolutely bloody fantastic.
Not only is it really good for gay rights, but it's also a big sign to the world when one of the world's most Catholic countries is willing to come out and support this issue. It sets an example for other Catholic countries just as much as it is good for rights, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've really got to... I think people really just have to realise that the only reason gay marriage hasn't been accepted, in the majority of so many modern countries is simply because of the conservatives.
Yeah.
You've got, this very small bunch of really strict, to the line, religious fanatics almost.
Yeah.
In that they're so unwilling to change their beliefs. Tony Abbott, yeah, that's it. They're just so strict to their beliefs that they're unwilling to, move through and accept that things are changing.
Yeah. Another thing I thought was really interesting is the way the debates changed from gay people are bad to gay people are good, but marriage is its own thing. It's changed.
It's changed over how much time? What are you... are you saying that Australians said that all gay people are bad?
I'm just comparing it to back in the day when gay marriage was not accepted out in public.
Oh yeah, well,
we've come a long way for sure.
Yeah, even when same-sex relationships were such a taboo subject, and now it's just part of our norm. So,
I mean, some people who are still living today would have seen this complete change in society's attitude during their lifetimes.
yeah, definitely. And, I think seeing how much society has adapted from, considering same-sex couples or relationships as such a taboo subject to moving forward and, willing to include them in marriage, I think that's, that's a really big step, and it's fantastic. And, I think considering that we've accepted same-sex relationships, it's only in its natural course to accept gay marriage.
Yeah, no, I'd agree entirely. It's just really good that this whole issue is moving forward because, quite frankly, gayness is a fact of life, and people really shouldn't be discriminated against for it in the same way we shouldn't discriminate against people with mental illnesses or physical disabilities. Yeah,
exactly right. And, I think the thing that frustrates me the most is when people say, oh, but they chose,
yeah.
When they chose to be gay, so therefore they can change back. Well, no.
No, they didn't choose the gay life.
Still say that?
Yeah, like a lot of, absolutely... Silly, yeah, let's stick with silly. Misinformed, naive, ignorant. That's the word I was looking for. A lot of ignorant people still go around saying that, and that infuriates me to absolutely no end.
Yeah, no, they didn't choose the gay life. The gay life chose them.
Ireland didn't have much of a choice, I didn't think. Like, the whole political culture in Western Europe is changing. Like, they're landlocked in terms of same-sex marriage. Like, same-sex marriage is, like, legal in Norway, Iceland, Finland, England, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain. Mm-hmm. Apart from Scotland and Northern Ireland above them, they're the only country in that entire region of the world that doesn't have it legalized.
And here's me thinking Scotland was progressive.
Yeah, well, they're making good progress. They've got, like, Scotland recognizes, like, civil partnerships and stuff, but yeah, there's been, like, a big push for Australia to have, like, a referendum about.
There has been, and yet Tony Abbott
marriage.
still stubbornly refuses to carry it out.
And I agree with him. Here's why. He came out on this weekend and said the most factually true, undebatable statement, right? He copped a lot of flack for saying this, but the Marriage Act is not part of our Constitution. It's state legislation. You cannot have a referendum for legislation.
Fair
you
enough.
can only have a referendum when you are voting on the Constitution. So I just sort of want to put that out there because, like, they copped a lot of backlash from a lot of youth organisations, non-governments and stuff. But, like, Australia physically cannot have this vote.
And here we see another example of people hating Tony Abbott for stuff that wasn't his fault. Now, as much as there is legitimate reason to hate Tony Abbott, this isn't one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, he's unfortunately totally right in that sense that, you cannot have a referendum unless you're debating on a constitutional matter. And as Tim just said, marriage is actually state legislation, so it's up to the people to pressure the government if they really want to see change.
Although, having said that, when a state did try to legislate, they got shut down by the federal government. The ACT is the example I'm giving here.
Yeah.
They tried, but Tony Abbott was like, yeah, nah.
No, because it's a federal legislation. It was like as progressive as it was really stupid for the ACT to try and do that.
Although, having said that, it was a really good PR exercise.
Yeah, that's true. At least, despite how much of a failure it was, at least it got the word out, which I think was important.
Yeah, no, these politicians don't think like humans. They think in terms of what will get me more votes, what is good for my PR. Like, whatever their personal beliefs are, they still have to toe the line and play the game.
Cool.
And speaking of towing the line, we're towing the line with our time for this segment right now, so...
We're moving on to our next song. This relates again to the drones issue for this week. It's just a song about, solution to the world's problems come through love, not rockets. This is Angels and Airwaves with Love Like Rockets.
It's not like that one Mitchell and Webb sketch where they decide to kill all the poor people.
Welcome back to Political Party. We are talking about less sexy than ISIS, issues that have been overshadowed by what Hamish calls the looming ISIS boogeyman.
This week, we're going nuclear again. We're going radioactive on this issue.
Egypt has backed a UN plan to, at a UN conference, have, backed a plan to, non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. And it failed ridiculously because Israel didn't want any part of it.
3 Security Council members voted against it. Wait, is Canada a member of the Security Council?
No.
It must be. Really?
Yeah, it was blocked by the US, UK, and Canada.
Yeah. So, that's interesting. And furthermore, the US has 2 allies in the region.
I don't think this was Security Council.
Yeah, the US have 2 allies in the region who either have nuclear weapons as the world's worst kept secret, or are attempting to obtain nuclear weapons from Pakistan, see Saudi Arabia. So, there are 2 US allies that are going to be directly affected by this issue. They were never going to vote yes. But the existence of Israeli nuclear weapons is one of the world's worst kept secrets. We know for a fact they have them, and...
For a fact?
It is a fact. Like, every single political source says they have them. Obama...
But have we seen the weapons yet? Because, like, the point of this, like, talk was to try and... the point of this, like, forum was, like... Because it wasn't ever going to pass, because Israel weren't going to accept it, because we unofficially know that they've got nuclear weapons, but there's no state announcement that they have.
One of their foreign ministers actually, or ministers of some kind, actually accidentally blurted it out on TV once.
The analysts regarding this issue have said that Egypt knew that the talks were going to fail because, like, Israel aren't part of the non-proliferation treaty, but they reckon that Egypt backed this plan solely to force Israel to reveal whether or not it actually has the nuclear weapons.
Well, I mean, that's fair enough, and it was a PR stunt. It was a good one. It's only going to provide good press for Egypt, because they're going to be seen as backing a nuclear-free world, attacking the old enemy Israel through diplomacy. You know, it was a good move for them.
Yeah, and, like, at face value, it looks like the most unrealistic, stupid idea ever, because Israel would never comply. But, like, it's a good diplomatic move, because like, nuclear weapons in the Middle East are a pretty hot issue, and given that Iran's not budging, they sort of turned their focus to Israel.
Oh, Iran are budging.
They are.
They have been willing to make certain concessions,
but nothing's been passed yet.
No, because every time that Iran actually attempts to make an agreement, the US have just ignored them.
Yeah, no, they have been willing to make concessions, but I think we're going to be seeing an agreement from this round of talks. I think June was the deadline they set. So I think that we will be seeing something productive come around this time. I sure hope so, because Iran's a big country. We need those commercial opportunities.
Yeah, and, you know, ever since 2003, there's actually been several attempts at a grand bargain between Iran and the US to settle, you know, all these different types of issues, you know, including nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, it's definitely time for the US to, you know, actually go to the table with Iran and, you know, start working through some of these issues.
Yeah. Although the one problem with that is that it'll antagonize both Saudi Arabia and Israel.
Well,
but
yeah.
Such is life, I guess. You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs.
Exactly.
And on that note, we're going to move to our last song for the day. This is a highly politicized song, which Chloe would probably be familiar with because I played this to her on repeat back in year 12. So this is a song about American dominance in the Middle East, pretty much, and how the US is becoming as extremist in its own beliefs as they are purporting their enemies to have. This is Amerikhastan.
It was always extremist. The world just caught up.
Welcome back to Politica Party, and this is Parody News.
Parody News, or is it a parody? So, let's have a look at the article.
US dispatches condolence drones to Middle East following civilian casualties. What do you think, Chloe? True or false?
Ooh. I'm going to say true.
Hamish, what do you think? True or false?
Oh, well, I mean, they do send drones to the Middle East, but condolence drones, what, they're going to, like, drop flowers or whatever? Like, drop roses, so the US can be, like, gentleman killer.
I don't know. Irony can be beautiful sometimes.
It can be. You're absolutely right. Like, they'll launch missiles full of, like, rice and flowers to scatter over weddings instead of death. No, I mean, it could be true, but it could also be false.
Yeah, it's a parody article.
It is.
In an effort to limit the fallout from any unintended collateral damage, the Pentagon has dispatched a fleet of unmanned aerial vehicles known as M2 Grievers to the Middle East, specifically designed to express condolences for civilian casualties. We've got a photo here of a UAV drone carrying
Flowers.
baskets of flowers and like care packages and stuff. So
you could rest in peace after you've been blown up.
Yeah. Officials from the Pentagon say that the M2 Griever can operate from such a high altitude that that grieving families often don't know a drone is hovering overhead until the moment of sympathy strikes.
The moment of sympathy.
Oh
So,
dear.
Yeah, that's our show for the day. DJ guys rocked up today. So good news
Cool.
all round. Thanks for a good show, Chloe.
Yes,
Thanks for
thank
coming
you.
in.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hamish and I have been your hosts, and Avanti didn't rock up.
This has been Political Party. See you next time.
Putting the cool in political.